Mr. Adrian Piccoli here is suggesting for governments to have more control. I think that this is a backward step. Hi, this is Ben Irawan. Recently, there's an article in the Sydney Morning Herald that really caught my eye. I'd like to know what you think. As you know, many of you know that I founded a Christian school called Kingdom Culture Christian School. So it is a private school, but more correctly, it is an independent or non-government school. So I'd like to know what you think about this, because this is really interesting. It's an article by Jordan Baker, 11th of August. Governments should fully fund private primary schools, say Piccoli. And so former New South Wales Education Minister Adrian Piccoli wants governments to fully fund private primary schools on the condition they stop collecting fees from parents and agree to abide by the same enrolment and accountability rules as public schools. Now, this is very interesting because as an independent non-government school, we are already abiding by the same accountability rules, especially with the financing and with the financial support that we get, the funding that we get from government. Probably independent schools, the processes are more stringent than the public schools. And this is interesting, to abide by the same enrollment rules. So that's quite interesting. The country's most expensive private schools already receive at least $4,000 per student in public funding, even if they charge $35,000 a year in parent fees. But note that not all private schools charge that much. Our school, Kingdom Culture Christian School, only charge $4,000 for primary schools, and we are considered a low fee paying independent non-government school. Professor Piccoli argues non-government schools receive so much public money that the proposal would only cost governments about $500 million a year. That's very interesting, because even parents who send their kids to private schools, they also pay taxes, and those taxes are also go towards the education, so public schools. And what about those who want to have better options or different options, and they still have to pay the taxes that would go towards public school, and also fork out some money to make the difference. Like, for example, our school gets funding about $10,000 per year per student. So and then we ask the parents to pay $4,000, so we can run a quality education for $14,000 per student per year. While public schools, they are fully funded and they get around about $16,000. So there's a big question mark there. How come they are fully funded and they have buildings that they don't have to pay rent? No rent goes towards the building, but how come there are so much more parents now going into more independent schools? There's a big question mark there. It is a radical idea for Australia and never taken seriously before because of the cost, he said. But given public funding of non-government schools has reached such a high point, government might as well bite the bullet and fully fund them as public schools. That's a really big question mark as well, because it seems like it's more about control now. That governments want to control more schools, even private and independent schools. Professor Piccoli, now the director of the Gonski Institute for Education at the University of New South Wales, said the present system allows only those who can afford fees to choose non-government schools, leaving them out of reach for many disadvantaged families. Under his proposal, the schools would still be run by non-government institutions such as churches or groups with alternative education philosophies such as Steiner, but like public schools, they would not be able to reject students or ask them to leave. Is this the reason why public schools are chaotic? I went to a public school when I was in primary and high school, and it was hell. I wanted to learn, but most of my friends didn't, and they just throw paper planes, and some even was smoking marijuana at the back of the class, and the teacher just put his feet up on the table and read a newspaper. That's what it was like. Probably I went to a very bad public school, but I think schools should be able to have the freedom to expel students, because if not, they don't have any power to discipline the students. Schools could continue to charge fees, but those that did would forfeit all government funding. Oh, wow. They would also have to answer to accountability processes such as budget estimates and have to comply with freedom of information laws. They would also have the same amount of money as public schools to spend on extra staff or equipment. It seems to me that Mr. Adrian Piccoli here is suggesting for government to have more control over schools, independent schools, Christian schools, religious schools, and other kind of schools. And I think that this is a backward step. I would prefer, because I pay taxes, and many of you pay taxes, but we would like to have the option and the freedom to choose what kind of education our children should be getting. I think I would probably prefer a system where the government should not fund schools, but the government should fund students and give the students vouchers, or each student vouchers to the parents, of course, so the parents and the students can choose which school they want to go to. So, for example, if for public school, it costs $16,000 approximately for each student. Then they can have a $16,000 voucher or whatever it is per annum that they can choose. Either they want to go to a public school, or they want to go to a Christian school, or they want to go to even a Muslim school, or a Japanese school, or French school. I just found out that there's a French school and they do most of their learning in French. Whatever it is, but I believe that freedom should be given to the parents or to the citizens, not actually taken from them. With what Adrian Piccoli is suggesting, government would then take more control from the parents and control more independent schools and Christian schools and religious schools. Then every school would start to be the same, and there won't be much choice. Because let me tell you, students are different, or every child is different. And the problem that I have with many schools, they're trying to make the same result or product out of different kids who have different abilities and skill sets. The danger is when we are trying to measure them at a certain measure only, then those who are not skilled in the academic would be seen as a failure. And so that's why there should be different kind of schools, Steiner schools, and our school, we focus in some measure with project-based learning and the 21st century, learning principles, collaboration and public speaking, entrepreneurship, and many of the soft skills. And that's what we feel is important. So I believe that citizens should be given more freedom, not taken away from them. So I would probably be more favorable towards a voucher system. So it's an equal level playing field, and it brings competition to the schools. And so if some of the schools need to pull their socks up because their enrollments are declining, because they're not so good, because the parents don't really have to send their kids to a school that is in the catchment area. No, they can choose the schools that are more suitable for for their child. For example, if it's more of a sporting school, or more of a math school, or more of a project-based school, or more of a Christian school, because the measure is different. It's not just about academics, it's about the holistic growth of each child. So I want to know what you think about this, because it's been, really going in my mind. And do you think that the voucher system is more fair for everyone? So I'd like to know your thoughts. Please comment below, and I'll be reading your comments and replying to them. Thanks. Bye.